Well, now to first alert weather. Chief Meteorologist Mic Merianos is tracking Hurricane Ian for us. Nick.
Yeah, seeing a lot of reports of the high winds coming in as the storm was making its approach, made landfall over southwest Florida as a high-end Category 4. Look at these wind reports coming in out of southwest Florida today. Cape Coral, 140 miles per hour. Fort Myers had winds upwards of 100 miles per hour. Near hurricane force reported in Tampa, but the hurricane force winds were really about within the 35-40-mile radius from the center of the storm. This was a satellite that was making its way toward the coastline, and right before it moved on shore, you could really see what's called the stadium effect. And this is signs of a very mature hurricane as it's barreling into southwest Florida. Worst case scenario for storm surge for those down the Fort Myers and Naples area, with storm surge exceeding more than 10 to 15 feet. And now it lost a lot of, at least a lot of the station wind reports coming in there. But look at all the rain on the northern side. This is going to cause some significant river flooding as we transition into the next 24 to 36 hours. A very serious event for those in Florida. But when it comes to storm surge, you heard just a few moments ago how some of the water drained out across the bay. Down to the south, I want to show you, this is at landfall point. Notice how the winds go counterclockwise, right? So if you head down to Fort Myers in the Naples area, you have very strong onshore winds. So look at the tide charts as we were approaching landfall. This is normal sea level right here, and watch that sea level just jump right up. At this point at the Naples gauge, nearly 9 to 10 foot surge, but there have been reports of 18-foot storm surge reported in southwest Florida. That is a horrific event taking place down there. Meanwhile, north, this is Tampa Bay right here. See those strong offshore winds? That pushed a lot of the water down outside of the bay. So you have your normal water levels here, and the opposite happened. You had a negative storm surge, and we have more video to show you of the water that was drained out of the bay area earlier today from Tampa Bay. And just look at that. So that is seafloor right there in the bay area, and docks sitting on the sand. So we had something similar like this happen a few years ago. It was Hurricane Irma, but days like today, you know, a storm track makes all the difference. If this hurricane tracked a little bit further to the north, Tampa Bay would have had a very different scenario. Rather than a negative storm surge, it would have been catastrophic flooding in the Bay Area.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay, stay with us, Nick, because we're going to take advantage of the fact that you worked in Tampa. The stadium effect, by the way, I hadn't heard that. I'm imagining that's like the eye is the stage, and then you have the steps leading to the outer bands. But let's talk about Tampa, right? Why is that region so vulnerable to flooding, and can they still potentially flood because they dodge the actual bullseye, as you said?
So as the storm continues moving through, really good question. On the backside, you can't forget about the backside winds. So winds do turn direction. So as the storm continues pushing its way to the northeast, you will eventually start seeing an onshore wind. So the Gulf beaches, so Clearwater Beach all the way down the southwest facing beaches, those would be the ones to watch for high tide cycle. But what makes this area so vulnerable has to do with the angle of approach. The storm angle of approach makes all the difference. And so the water, for instance, down to the southwest in southwest Florida, shoves all that water into the bay. You can think of it like in the bay. Last time Tampa Bay had a direct hit from a major hurricane, it was back in 1921. Tampa Bay filled up with so much water from that storm surge because it made landfall north of the city. It overflowed across Pinellas County in the St. Pete area and drained back out into the Gulf of Mexico. So essentially part of Pinellas County near St. Petersburg, for those who are not familiar, was isolated at the height of that storm in 1921. If this storm made landfall north of Tampa, it would have done a very similar effect or even worse, because that storm in 1921 did put downtown Tampa under 10 feet of water. Not to mention the infrastructure, all the new residents that have moved there from non-tropical areas. This is probably their first hurricane in a lot of cases, so really making that area vulnerable.